Hello guys, welcome to another episode of Bob's Woodshop. I'm just finishing up this soccer ball project. A friend of mine over in Mendham, a gentleman named Bob Steenbach, gave me this idea to make this ball. I was originally looking at the ones that he had done and I'm thinking there's no way I could do that. And he insisted it was relatively easy. So I came home and watched a YouTube video and I said, oh, that's how you do it. So there's a couple things that you need to do in order to make a project like this. This is the temporary stand. All right, so the two main things that you need, in addition to a L fence, are the beginning shapes. So we need a pentagon, 5-sided, and we need a hexagon, which is a 6-sided item. Now, there's different ways in order to make these shapes. As a matter of fact, there's many different ways in order to figure this out on the internet. This is not a tutorial on how to make these shapes or draw these shapes. There's plenty of ways to do that, but you do need to come up with two different shapes like this, and these are going to be the templates for the project. In this project, you need 20 hexagons and you need 12 pentagons. So the first thing you have to do is make yourself a stack of at least 20 of these. You have to have 20. And I would recommend making 22 because you're going to need some for the waste blocks a little bit later on. As long as you're making 22, you might make 24 just in case you have to make some adjustments. But basically what you're going to do is get this hexagon. You're going to put it down on the piece of wood, and you're going to be riding each of these faces against your L fence, which I'll demonstrate in a little while. Then you have to manage all these little pieces coming off, which again I'll explain that in a little bit. You're going to do the same thing with the pentagons, and I strongly recommend you just can't put one of these shapes on top of the wood and run it through the fence. What I did was I got 3 different small drywall screws, and these are just sticking out just slightly in order to give you a positive grip on the wood. And as long as you got that positive grip, then you can run that across the table saw. Okay. So I'm going to do a little foreshadowing here. Once you have the 5 pieces cut, and you need a configuration like this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for the top and another one for the bottom. And when you're all ready to glue, and I would strongly recommend once you make these shapes, you do a test fit like this and make sure all these surfaces are flat against each other. You really don't want any gaps in the ball when you're doing this. So you're going to need one of these for the bottom. You're going to need another one for the top. Okay, and then for the middle, and unfortunately I did have some video of me gluing this up with my wife, and somehow I lost that segment. So, but basically what you're going to do is you're going to put glue in each of these joints, and you're going to roll this up like this. That's a little sloppy, but for illustration purpose, that's okay. So you're going to start with the bottom. You're going to then put the middle in, and then you're going to put the top. These are all test pieces, so these particular ones don't fit together. These are larger than these ones, but you get the idea. So once you have these glued, then you glue these surfaces. I obviously glue the bottoms of these pieces, and then you're going to tape the heck out of it, which I'll show you a little bit later on. So honestly, it's relatively simple so far. After that, then you have to get the pentagons, and you have to glue and tape the pentagons, and there are going to be 12 pentagons. So let's go over the table saw and we'll go from there. So once you make one, it's real easy to make a second one. And I still have to sand this one. This one's pretty well sanded. I got a little bit more to do. This one needs a little bit more work cutting, but it's pretty round. Not quite there. And then this is what it's going to look like once it's glued up. Let me move this. so you can zoom in. So this is what it's going to look like when it's glued up. This particular one is not that great because I got these gaps in here. So I was going a little bit too fast, and you really should not have any gaps in here at all. Now this one had a couple gaps, but it came out just fine, but you might have to fill them later on. I was talking about the waste blocks that you have. So you have to glue on waste blocks on each side in order to turn it on the lathe. Okay, so I'm going to do the turning of the ball with a circle cutting jig, but there's other ways to do it. You could just do it with a bowl gouge or a scraper. Okay, and once you turn it around this way, you'll turn around about 80% this way, then you have to reposition it on the lathe this way, and it'll be turning like this in order to knock the glue blocks off, as well as make this part of the ball round also. So, okay, now let's get started on the table saw. Hexagon, and I'm going to use a couple paint sticks as a spacer. And I'm just going to use a couple quick clamps. And then I'm going to remove all this. And I'm going to set the blade maybe about a half an inch away from the fence. So I'm going to set the fence. So I'm going to set the fence about a half inch away from the blade. Obviously, you want to cut through the work piece, but you don't want to cut through your template. Okay, so then you're going to have a bunch of small pieces that you're cutting off here. And what I have here is my shop vac on exhaust mode, and that is going to blow those little pieces right past here. So again, I had these 3 small drywall screws, and I've got the drywall screws almost flush with the top. Don't use taller screws because you're going to have to hold down this whole fixture with a push block. So what I was doing was just giving these a tap, and that's giving me a positive stop. Okay, and then from there, I could push each one through, which I'll demonstrate shortly. You can do that 6 times, and you're going to get that hexagon shape. The size of the block, what I did, I made the size of the block a little bit larger than the hexagon. Didn't really need to be. You can make it a little bit smaller if you want to try to save wood. I just felt more comfortable having it a little bit bigger than the hexagon fixture. So the exhaust from the shop vac is going to be blowing out pretty forcefully, and it's going to shoot those little cutoffs. So, and they'll come off the end of the table saw. You can clean them up later if you want to. What I was doing, I was putting my waist closer to it, and then the pieces would land right in at my waist level, so I didn't have to pick them up. So you have to do that. Again, for the hexagons, you use a 22 degree tilt angle, and for the pentagons, you have to use a 16 degree tilt angle. And it's really that straightforward. Okay. So when you place the pentagons on the white pieces, they basically go on like this. And these white pieces are 3.5 inches wide by 3 3/4. They could be a little bit bigger. That's not an issue. I used 3 drywall screws, real short drywall screws. And what I do is I place the template on the wood, and then I get a hammer and I just tap that. And that provides a nice positive grip on the maple piece. Now you'll see that I've got corners here, and I want to take those corners off first, because if I would use these 2 sides, it creates a long piece that tends to get caught underneath the fence, and that's, these all shoot back at you. So if it's smaller piece like this, the vacuum cleaner on blow mode pushes them back pretty easily. So let me show you how to do it. Now, I'm comfortable with using my hand and pushing through like this. Another technique, if you want to keep your hands away from it, you can push down with a push block, and you can also use a push stick that I cut a 45-degree angle in. So that would hold that nice and tight. So a really important thing is you have to keep downward pressure and pressure against the fence. If this slightly comes up, if you're not putting good pressure on this, it's going to want to rise and you're going to get a kickback, and that's kind of scary. So you got to have a lot of downward pressure and a lot of side pressure. All right, so let me show you how to do that. Let's turn the blower on. Again, I want to knock the corners off first. I'm actually comfortable doing it with my hands. I feel I get the most control that way. Turn that off. Okay, and then what you can do, I just use a screwdriver and pop that off. Okay, then we'll do the same thing, and you have to do this 20 times because the top needs 5 pieces, the bottom needs 5 pieces, and the ring around the center needs 10 pieces. So again, I just give this a little tap, and I'll go again. Okay, turn that on. So I got my buddy Tom in the shop today. He's a cutting board maker, but he saw this project and he said, "Oh, I got to make one of those." One tip I would give you, when you're doing this, you got to make sure you're in the moment the entire time. You got to make sure that you're pressing, hold on. You got to make sure that you're pressing down and against the fence because of that, again, if the maple comes up a little bit because you don't have downward or sideward pressure, you're going to get in trouble and you're going to get a wicked kickback. The other thing I was doing, you might not have noticed, I was keeping my waist right about there, so the blower was blowing him right to my waist, and that way I don't have to pick them up off the floor. That's just a little hint, not a big time saver, but something I did. You'll see what I did here with the, I have a shop vac that's in blow mode, and I just have it stabilized with a big iron block that I use for weights every once in a while. So that's a way to use the blower if you're doing this by yourself, which you most likely are. Tom just got here a little while ago, but it took me about 2 hours to set up the saw and make these two. So it really doesn't take all that long to do all this stuff. But more importantly, it's not about time, it's about the quality of the cuts, and take your time, right? So hey, a lot of us are retired and we got plenty of time on our hands. So this is the stack that Tom's working on right now. Make sure you make some glue blocks if you're going to turn these, because we're going to have to put this one of these on each side, and I'll show you that later on when I turn these. But make a couple extras. Okay, the reason you heard those little kickbacks is because the fence can tend to sink on you a little bit if it's not clamped perfectly good. So you got to check every once in a while, make sure your clearance here, and that way we're not going to get that little kickback that we just heard. Let me demonstrate. We got to turn the vacuum on. Turn that off for a second. Now there's some trial and error with this. So you can start out a little bit bigger. The further away that you move the fence, the smaller the pentagon gets. So that's something I learned after doing this. And then you take this off and you pop it in like here. What I'm trying to do is to have the top of the pentagon flush with this surface right here. Again, still way too big, and all I'm really going to do is sneak up on that until I get it just right. I'm going to do that off camera. Okay, I think I've got this dialed in now. Take the screws out. And that's the fit you're looking for. Ideally, you want it just flush with the top like this. And if you're going to turn it, it's okay if it's going to be a little proud or a little recessed, but ideally that's what you're looking for. So this was my test piece in order to dial it in. Now I've got to cut the mahogany pieces. I need 12 pentagons. By the way, this pentagon is roughly 4 1/4, corner to corner. Something like that. And then the piece of wood I've got here is 4 3/8 by 4 3/8. Now the piece that's going to be fitting in there is much smaller. That's only 2 1/2. So as long as you place it somewhere in there, I like covering the entire surface. We're having the entire walnut piece totally exposed so you can get on here. So you do something like that. Screw this. Make sure you got a real good grip on this. That's what I'm looking for. So obviously this is oak and walnut. So now I got to make 11 more pieces of this, of the walnut. I'll go ahead and do that off camera. Okay, that's number 2. And need 10 more. When you're using the template, just make sure you don't cut all the way through the template. So you got to go past the height of the block that you're working on, but just don't go through the template. Otherwise you'd have to make that over again. Okay, so you need 2 glue ups like this. This is the top and bottom. This is what it looks like when it's all taped together. And then you need 10 pieces in this configuration. Let me show you how it glues together. So we're in the dog days of June. It's very hot in New Jersey. It's about 91 degrees today. So just when you're putting these together, make sure there's a really tight fit and you're matching corner to corner. And then just fold this up. Oops. Okay. So when you're getting ready to tape them together and glue, and to test it, just make sure all these corners are nice and tight. And it should look like that. Very tight fit. Love these joints. And then these are going to fit in like this. I was actually a little proud, but that'll come off in the turning process. Let's see. This walnut is about the same, just slightly proud, which is okay. Okay, and then what we're going to do, to help you with the glue up and hold the joints together while you tape each one. So that's what it's looking like. So my honey's not home right now. She's at the grocery store. And I would recommend just getting a sand block and just cleaning up any fuzzies on each one. Okay, and that'll make for a better glue joint. So these take about 15 minutes each to glue up. And I strongly recommend you get a helper, your wife or other person, child, to help you tape all this up and glue it. Another thing, when you're putting the tape on, put a tab here, hold it with 2 fingers, and have the other person pull it down. So press here and pull this tag in as tight as you can get it. That helps pull the joints together. So, all right, so that's enough for today. So the hexagon is top to bottom or side to side at 3 3/8, and from corner to corner it's at 4. And on the pentagon, from top corner to top corner, it's 4 1/2, and from top to bottom this way it's at 4 inches. These are approximate. They don't have to be exactly that. Once you make your initial cuts, you're also going to have to give some relief on these sides so that pieces aren't getting caught inside there. So you need to make some glue blocks for both sides of the ball. And in order to do that, you draw lines to find the center, and then you drill a small hole for the live and the drive center. Okay, now what's going to happen, I've already glued and taped on these waste blocks here, and that would be a very deep clamp, so I just weighted it down And then I'm going to be putting this in the live and the dry center here. And we'll be able to turn it on the lathe. I'm going to do that over at my buddy's house. We'll be doing that a little bit later this morning. So I'm over at my buddy's Bob Steenbach. He's in Mendham, New Jersey. He's a professional wood turner. And he's got this set up now. We've got this sphere cutting jig. Let me switch this around. So this is his giant Powermatic. Bob's a retired but professional wood turner. Does all type of stair parts and all kind of other. So we set it up, and we're on center. And who manufactures this thing, Bob?
Spin Doctor.
Spin Doctor. So it's critical to have the center here, right underneath the ball, and we measured so that we have the same amount of cut on each side. And now we're just going to slowly advance the cutting tip into the ball. We're going at about 728 RPM right now. And we're going to test how good my glue joints are. Now Bob's good enough, he can do this by eye. But I've never cut a sphere before, and so I wanted to use this sphere cutting fixture. So the trick here is to take just a little bit at a time, because we don't want to explode any of these joints. So after every pass, we have to advance the post just a little bit, and then we're going to take another sweep. That's what it looks like after about 4 passes. So this is just a matter of advancing this screw about a quarter turn. And we're just going to slowly take our time trying to avoid catches. And eventually this is going to be round.
So he wanted me to make him a bat rack.
Okay.
Well, you've got the Nova, right?
Just- just- So I spent a couple hours over at Bob's shop doing the turning. Now I'm back to my shop 2 days later doing the sanding. Okay, so the project came out pretty well. I actually made 3 of these. This is the first one I've got the first coat of boiled linseed oil on. I'm working on this one also. I had to fill a few of the gaps that were in the segments. So I've got some glue drying in there. I've closed those up. I'll put some boiled linseed oil on this tomorrow after I do a final sanding. And this one is, so you can see, I'm going to try this without the sphere cutting jig. So I'm going to work on this. I've never really cut a sphere without a sphere cutting jig, so I'm going to try that a little bit later. So this is the big one. These 2 are the smaller ones. So it came out pretty well. Again, this project looks very intimidating. When I first looked at it, it was very intimidating to me until I watched a couple YouTube videos on how to do this. So I've added my own slant on some of the things that I learned throughout that process. So this is going to be a nice little trophy. Could be a lamp. I've gotten several suggestions on what to do with this. So again, it's 20 hexagons and 12 pentagons. Came out very nice. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for hanging in there throughout the entire video to check this out. I do have to put a couple more coats of boiled linseed oil on this. It'll become much shinier. So again, thanks for tuning in, and like, comment, and subscribe, and thanks so much for your time today.